Good morning, and welcome to this breakfast policy briefing on reconciling competitiveness and economic security, which is kindly supported by Equinor. Very glad to have Tinne van der Straeten, the Minister of Energy for the federal government of Belgium, followed by a response by Anders Opedal, the President and Chief Executive of Equinor. Clearly, competitiveness is very high on the agenda. It has become a bit of a watchword again, it has to be said. We keep circling around issues in Europe, but it will be high on the agenda of the next commission. The question is, what does it actually mean, and how do we deliver it? It's always good to have another report, but maybe the question is, how do we actually turn that into reality in a world which is much more challenging? And I think this is clearly where we're also seeing the link to economic security, and in particular, the focus of today will be in part on energy security. Clearly, there's a strong relationship between competitiveness and energy and economic security. But how do we deal with the trade-offs which are there? How do we deal with the costs which are associated with these transitions which we're going through, and who pays for those costs? I think last time we saw each other was in the context of the project of Fair Energy Transition for All, supported also by the King Bodin Foundation, where it was very clear that individuals are feeling the cost, that they are feeling that this transition has to be fair. But we're also now seeing a lot of companies saying that the costs are becoming a real issue, and they might lead to trade-offs between the different objectives which we are facing. And clearly, this is also a question of how do we make this compatible with the sustainability agenda, with the long-term agenda of transition of our economies into a more green, efficient, fair, secure world, which we really need at this moment in time. So very happy to have this discussion today. We will have a keynote from the minister to start with, and then a response. And afterwards, we'll have a discussion between us, but also between you in the room. And I also hopefully have the ability to get questions from our online audience. So welcome to those people who have joined us online. So I'm looking forward to having a very good discussion, and we'll start with a keynote by the minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian, for the introduction. I was listening to you and I was wondering if you make a state of the situation as it is, and it is a right description that you gave. I was wondering, okay, who is wanting to be a minister or a CEO in these challenging times? It's also maybe a topic, and it is a topic that I also will assess in my short introduction. But I think that the short answer is also just keep the line. And that it's very important to keep moving. Yes, the world is challenging. It's also a time that calls for counterintuitive policy, and that we have to have the ability as policymakers. And I'd love to hear you from your perspective, as CEO, from the corporate perspective, but from a policy perspective, it's very important that we have the ability to decide, that decision power is there, and that we are not paralyzed by the situation before us. It is now more than a year that we have this Russian invasion, brutal invasion in Ukraine, and also the phrase that we use a lot: Russia has turned energy into a weapon. But let's also reflect on what that means. There is a Ukrainian perspective and also a European perspective on that one. The Ukrainian perspective, all the strikes against Sylvian energy infrastructure and the fact that Russia invaded and also launched a lot of missile attacks against energy infrastructure that was specifically targeted, and that put already on the 24th of November 2022, half of the power grid was taken out of commission, and 10 million Ukrainian households were without electricity. It was before winter. It was a clear target from Russia. And after winter, in spring, there was a sabotage of the Nova Kakhovka dam. That put a major area of Ukraine underwater, and was also with a major upstream effect on the water that was needed to cool the Zaporizhia power plant. That's one side of using energy as a weapon, to use energy really to put people literally in the cold. And also from the European perspective, a weapon and manipulation of the market, cutting off and scaling down, reducing first supply and then cutting off supply, and playing into that volatility in the European market, volatility price-wise, because we still had supply from gas to Europe, thanks to Equinor, to Norway, direct connections that we have between Belgium and Norway. We were able to manage to not have, and also together with the demand destruction that we saw, and losing less energy, we managed from a security of supply perspective. We managed, but a lot of companies, a lot of people, a lot of households were hurt by these high prices and the volatility of these prices. And added to that, energy also became a security matter. We saw it with the sabotage of Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 in the Baltic Sea on the 26th of September 2022, but also with what's now happening on the Baltic interconnector between Finland and Estonia, also now out of commission. We were discussing just during breakfast, but also with suspicion of sabotage. So we have to manage different aspects at the same time. How do we secure supply? How can we secure prices in one way or the other? But also, how do we manage security? So we are under different angles of the same topic. Yet all is not doom and gloom. Europe acted in unity. We met several and many times as ministers of energy. We came with a Repower EU plan. There were all these commitments made on offshore wind in Esbjerg, first in Denmark, with the North Sea Summit here in Belgium, in Ostende, with the aim to diversify energy supply, affordable energy prices, saving energy, and also putting a lot of acceleration into the energy transition. But yet, the world is still challenging. Not in all parts of Europe, the energy crisis or the war is top of mind, but we are faced still with consequences. Although prices are not so volatile anymore, we see other consequences like inflation that you mentioned, increases of costs, and that is also threatening the energy transition that we so urgently need, both to secure prices, but also to secure supply. And I would like to quote the author Da Empoli. He wrote a book, the L'Image du Kremlin, the Kremlin Fluisteraar, and I don't know the translation in English. And when his book was translated, it's originally in French. When it was translated in Dutch, he gave an interview in Belgian newspapers on both sides, both in French-speaking and Dutch-speaking newspapers, and he said the following: I realize again how complicated, ambiguous, contradictory, and difficult the situation is for Europe. So perhaps that is my advice. Don't look at what is happening as a linear situation. You face difficult trade-offs, paradoxes, and ambiguity. And as a policymaker, you must accept and manage that when you are in power, now more than ever. I believe in leaders who understand that, leaders who just send viral tweets we don't need right now. But it was specifically what he said about you face trade-offs, you face paradoxes, and you face ambiguity. And as a policymaker, indeed, you have to manage that, and you have to still take decisions. And so how do we do that? And when we see in the months ahead, how do we manage that? You are already talking on the next commission, and rightly so. We will be the presidency that will prepare the strategic agenda for the next European Commission. But let's not forget there is also still 6 months left, and we cannot afford to not continue to work during these 6 months. From an energy perspective, what do we see? We see inflation. We see costs of financing going up. We see permitting not going as fast as is needed. And we see also huge constraints on the supply chain. All this is threatening, and all this is not encouraging investments to be done. These investments that we so urgently need now to be taken. The whole situation calls for an attitude, or it should be logical, that from an investor's point of perspective and also from a policy perspective, that you would say, okay, let's sit it out. Let's wait for a few years and see what happens. If you are Latvia, for example, or another Baltic country that is self-sufficient in energy, it could be an approach that can be defended. So from your own perspective, in your own national context, you are in fact quite fine. And why bother your citizens with helping industries who want to invest, who need a backing to do these investments, if in fact it's investments that for your country specifically you don't need, because you can manage. Your security of supply is managed. There are other countries in Europe, like Germany, also Belgium, who so badly need also these energy imports. And so we need to tap into the potentials that the seas hold with regard to energy, offshore wind, but also hydrogen. And so that means, so these investments are needed now. They also need some time. So if we don't do it now, we will lose. We lose time. We lose time for climate change. It's investments that we need to keep in line with the 1.5 target from the Paris Agreement, but also from a security perspective with regard to energy, we need these investments now. So what are we doing then? I will speak both from a national perspective and from a European perspective. From a national perspective, we have decided to build an artificial energy island in the North Sea and connect up until 3.5 gigawatts of offshore wind to it. It's electricity that we need. And the energy island, we built it specifically to also interconnect with Denmark, with the UK, and hopefully in the future with Norway, working on that one. How do we back up such an investment? And that is also putting public money behind it. We are setting up a two-sided contract for difference, and we will take into account also the fact that we are in a difficult economic situation. And the reason that we do it, and I defend it, and that I said it's important, and we have a very difficult budget situation in Belgium, is because I'm absolutely convinced that if we don't build the infrastructure today, our industries will be suffering. It's not an investment decision for energy projects alone. It's if we don't invest in energy infrastructure, we cannot, it will be more difficult for industries that come more downstream to also take investment decisions. We have in Belgium a lot of manufacturing industries like steelmaking in Ghent, but also the life sciences in Antwerp region. We have the refineries also in our Antwerp region. These are industries that provide us with materials, with the products, with the half products that we so badly need in the energy transition. If we don't secure an access to green and affordable energy, then other investments will not follow. If we don't build hydrogen pipelines, if we don't build electricity lines, if we don't build infrastructure in the sea, then we cannot anchor our industries here. And so every public euro that is invested in energy infrastructure, I'm absolutely convinced that it will be paid back on several fronts. It will secure energy prices for households, for industries, and so on. But it will also attract other investments decision and will anchor our industries here. So that's how we see it in Belgium, and that's also exactly how that we bring it to the European agenda. We need, from a European perspective, we need to work on the same issues, cost inflation, cost of financing, permitting, supply chain, and also work at European level on an action plan, on a framework with regard to grid infrastructure on one side, but also what European Commission is publishing this month, on the 24th of October, a wind power action plan. We have a big market in the North Sea alone. In the North Sea alone, we have a big market for European offshore wind turbines. It's a market that we should nurture. I know that many questions will come with the relation to United States, with the IRA, and it's all true. It's all true. And it's also a situation that we need to manage. But let's not forget that we have, with the sea basins in Europe, also a huge European market that we can tap into, that we can build thousands and thousands of wind turbines into the North Seas with materials that will be produced inside the European Union. So yes, I'm a little protectionist here. And it's not, it's protectionism on different views. It's also with regard to our households, our industries, our companies. We will bring this to the strategic agenda for the next commission, but we will be working on this already in the upcoming 6 months. The Wind Power Action Plan will come with actions addressed to member states, to industries. So we are not going to just wait 6 months and then leave it up until the next commission. So you hear, I think, from what I say and how I say it, that I am still optimistic. I know the situation is grim, and I don't want to underestimate the situation, but this is not the time to freeze. This is not the time to stay still. In my view, there is nothing wrong with baby steps. It's small steps, as long as you set many, many, many in the right direction. And this decision power is what we so urgently need. Also, in my view, industries need. It's the beginning, it's the framework, in its stability in which other investments decisions can be made. So how to reconcile competitiveness and economic security is to move forward without drama.
Thank you very much. Always good to have a more optimistic point of view. I mean, I think, yes, a lot of things are happening. The question is, for me, can we move from reactive to anticipatory and start to think about what are the long-term structural choices we have to take? And I think certainly Belgium will also have a specific role in Europe, given the upcoming presidency and hopefully discussions around what is the long-term strategic direction of European policy. But one issue which was already mentioned was the question of investment and the role of private companies. How do we actually reconcile this? How do we ensure that we have these investments also given the enormous scale of investment which is necessary, not across only one transition, but across all the different transitions we are facing at the moment. So please.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister van der Straaten. Always good to meet you and discuss energy, both on the higher level, but also on the relationship between Equinor and Belgium. So good morning, everyone, and let me start by taking you to Hammerfest. This is as far north as you can get on mainland Norway, and actually also in Europe. It's almost 2,400 kilometers from here, or 27 hours non-stop drive. So it's not just around the corner. But every 4 to 5 days, an LNG tanker leaves Hammerfest, mainly towards European harbors. And one such tanker carries around 1 terawatt hours of gross energy. So let me explain a little bit what that actually means. Every year, this LNG plant produces energy corresponding to the need of 6.5 million European households. Germany has 1,539 offshore wind turbines with a capacity of 8.1 gigawatt. It will take all these offshore turbines almost 14 days to produce the same amount of gross energy as one single ship from Melkøya delivers. The Hammerfest LNG plant is vital for European energy security, but it also serves an example of the magnitude and the complexity of the energy transition. To succeed, we need an energy transition, but we also need energy addition. We need both more German and Belgian wind power and Hammerfest energy to produce with as low emissions as possible. Norway and Europe have a strong energy partnership that has lasted for decades and served both Norway and Europe well. Energy security, industrialization, and job creation has been the core of our partnership, benefiting the people of Europe and of Norway. The war in Ukraine has taught us in the most horrible way that peace and democracy are cannot be taken for granted. And how exposed we are when it comes to energy, as you, Minister, explained. The world has changed both in terms of geopolitics and economy. Climate change is happening before our eyes, and the pace of the energy transition is too slow. But what does it take to pick up the pace of the energy transition, to provide energy security for people and industry at a price they can afford to pay? Let me start with what I don't think we need to lower the bar. I fear we will see more of it, that we might see countries and companies moving their targets and timelines. It reflects the complexity and how hard it will be to reach the Paris goals. Inflation and higher energy prices impacts people. Social effects are visible around Europe. I understand that politicians must handle this alongside working on ambitious climate goals. But everlasting discussions on ambitions, numbers, and targets will not take us there. My focus is action. Equinor stands firm. By 2030, our ambition is to halve emissions from our operated fields, invest more than 50% in renewables and low carbon solutions, reduce net carbon intensity by 20%, including emissions from the use of the product we sell. By 2050, we aim to be a net zero company. When I look to Europe, I recognize this shared determination among many of our industrial partners. I also share the concern for a loss of competitiveness and access to skills and technologies. Europe has challenges that call for actions and for collaboration, such as the EU-Norway Green Alliance and between Norway and individual countries such as Belgium. And also a lot to thanks to you, Minister. We need to join forces if Europe is to succeed with the energy transition and with long-term industrial competitiveness. To move forward at an even higher pace, I see three important areas. First, let the market decide on technology. We must reduce the carbon footprint in today's energy system. When shaping the energy system of tomorrow, we need to be technology open. We must, as the UN Climate Panel reports say, use the entire toolbox. Coal needs to be phased out. Natural gas needs to be made cleaner through carbon capture and safe offshore storage. And we must develop renewable energy much faster than today. We all know the energy transition does not belong to one technology, to one company, to one country. Therefore, it's my firm opinion that government should not pick winners and losers. The energy transition is hard work by the many, energy producers and consumers alike. To deliver change at a scale and a time, Europe will need to be technology open and explore new forms of industrial cooperation. I also believe competition is the best way to make sure that the energy transition does not come with higher costs than needed for people and industries. A second point, we must work together and build trust. We need to collaborate closer, but more importantly, we need to act together. We must understand and respect each other's roles. The minister, and I see it here in Belgium, as we look to realize complex projects for industrial decarbonization. Projects that require clarity of roles and expectations between governments, institutions, and industry. Long-term investments need stable and predictable framework conditions. Let us recognize that it will be difficult to navigate the energy transition, and even more difficult if taxes and regulations constantly change. I see some tendency that we blame each other. The industry points to lack of framework conditions, and authorities point to lack of will on the part of business interests. This is counterproductive. And I very much hope that the announced European social dialogue that can bring together business, unions, and governments to solve these challenges. Competitiveness testing of new legislation is key. As the Commission President said, it's time to make business easier in Europe. And my last point, we must invest in infrastructure, as you also mentioned, Van der Straeten. Our common energy infrastructure has served us well. We must now invest in the infrastructure of tomorrow's energy systems. We need to build production facilities, pipelines, and storage just for hydrogen, and transport system for CO2 to safe storages. We have introduced the idea of a CO2 highway, connecting Belgium to a CO2 storage on the Norwegian continental shelf. We are working on an annual capacity of 15 to 30 million tons for CO2 transport and storage by 2035. And to succeed with renewables, we need to expand the power grid. There will be no energy transition without energy transmission. No one will be able to make such investments alone. No industries, maybe not even countries. We need to plan, invest, and build together. But to do this, it's essential that we have an internal energy market that we all have confidence in. The market that is fair to investors and consumers alike. Europe will not succeed in the energy transition without the internal energy market. Under your presidency of the EU, Minister, you will have to find agreement on important market legislation. Market rules and framework guides in investors' actions. And there will be no energy transition without funding from investors. Access to oil and gas will be important for decades to come. I therefore firmly believe that decarbonizing oil and gas production and hard-to-abate industry, or as we say, have to abate to stay competitive, is an important part of the energy transition. We hope that COP28 will result in national governments increasing their focus and ambition on decarbonization. Last week, I was in Abu Dhabi to discuss commitments to reduce CO2 emissions with peers from all over the world. The oil and gas companies are invited to the table at the United Nations Climate Summit next month, COP28. I support the COP presidency's work for clear and tangible results in the energy sector. Equinor is already committed, and we expect our peers to do the same at COP28. I started today to take you to Hammerfest, the small city in the northernmost part of Europe. In August, Equinor got permission to electrify the LNG plant from 2030. This will cut emissions from the production of LNG with 850,000 tons a year. It's the largest climate measure in Norway ever. Still, the decision was controversial and created strong emotions and a lot of criticism of the government and of Equinor for us seizing a lot of electrical power, fear of higher energy prices, and fear of lack of energy for other industries. Some also argue that the measure has no effect on the climate. We are confident that the decision is right. For energy security and for cutting emissions, for job and ripple effects. The project demonstrates the complexity of the energy transition and trade-off between different considerations. Dilemmas and dependency in the energy systems are now more visible than ever. I think the next decade will give us many more cases where we have to balance different considerations, where views stand sharply against each other, and there will be a high temperature in the debate. The energy transition is demanding, and it's going to be demanding. It will be expensive. And we will need better answers, better solutions, and better collaborations. As Lily, a 25-year-old engineer working for Equinor, has put it, I'm not in the business wishing things were better, but to make them better. I think that's the mindset we need to succeed with our task. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We've now gone from Belgium to the EU level to Hammerfest via Abu Dhabi. We're doing a world tour. But I wanted to get a little bit more concrete. And I think one of the points you made about stability of long-term policy and where we going to go with those long-term goals. And I'll ask you, Minister, to start. This is probably not going to make life easier for politicians, but we have to recognize that at the moment, we're starting to see a lot of pushback. We're seeing that in a number of countries, there's real concern about the costs of the energy policies. And we have started to see, I think, politically, that in some countries, there's a move away from these long-term commitments. If we look at the UK, for example, there was the announcement by Prime Minister Sunak about changing long-term targets. There was a very clear response from part of industry, which said this is actually detrimental. We need stability. But I would expect that we're actually seeing much more both climate populism, that we're seeing that pushback in terms of costs imposed on individuals, but also concerns raised by industry. So what is our response in terms of stability of long-term goals?
In any case, the long-term contracts are stabilized in the UNFCCC framework and also in the Paris Agreement to start with. But you're absolutely right. We see this major pushback coming from a cost perspective. And okay, it's time to go a little bit slower. But let's have a real look at costs. We have faced only 2 summers ago a water bomb in the Walloon region with people who died, who lost everything. The same in Slovenia this year, the same in Germany this year. What happens in Greece, in Brazil, in Northern Africa. These are costs of climate change. And politicians and policymakers saying, okay, let's sit back, let's relax, let's not go too fast. It's a race to the bottom. It's a race to the bottom. And it specifically hurts me that this is coming from the UK, who have been an engine for quite some years to net zero targets within the European Union. To me, it has always been a pity to not have the UK with us in the European Union. I've worked as a minister very hard to include them in the energy dialogue, to make them part and a member of NSEC like Norway, to participate in the North Sea Summit like Norway, because there are two countries for the European continent without those countries that we cannot succeed, and it's with the UK and it's with Norway. So it's populistic, and it will hurt citizens, it will hurt households, industries the same. So how to move forward? And maybe I can give a little pushback to your first point on let the market decide on technology. I have in principle no issue with that thing. But you said governments should not pick winners and losers. And it's, I think it's this first point, also, we need to reframe it a little bit. Also, what you mentioned with regard to your second point was we shouldn't have an intention to blame, and it also goes with technology openness. What if governments can or cannot pick winners and losers? If industries, if energy investors come and see governments to ask to put public money behind it, it is also a right to government to say what they want and what they don't want. What they want to finance, what they don't want to finance. It's not up to markets alone. Markets are shaped by policies, are shaped by targets, are shaped by climate targets. And we need to hold the line on that topic, and we need to translate them. And there I do agree. We need to translate them not in a black and white. We need, for example, when we decided in Belgium to put research money into small and modular reactors, we defined the criteria, and we said what we didn't want. We said we want a nuclear technology without waste, because I have a huge waste management problem in Belgium that was not taken care of for 20 years, not from an industrial point of view, not from a financial point of view. So it is a right, it is a duty even for a government to say, this is what we want. We want carbon neutrality. We don't want CO2, we don't want waste, to define criteria in which the market can play. I think it's not so black and white as you said it in your second point. And to how to move forward is exactly what the second point of Mr. Opedal was, is we should cut loose the intention to blame. And that's exactly what we did. The format on the North Sea Summit was a trilateral summit. It was prime ministers and heads of state. It was line ministers, and it was industries. And we didn't do a lot of stump speeches, I think only in the beginning and at the end, just to make the hosting country rise and shine. But the core of the event was round tables with everyone sitting around the same table, and for one time, people not speaking from notes but from experience. And it's this event that led to the wind power plan. Ursula von der Leyen, who said, "I want to continue this conversation," and I think more close collaboration and a better understanding what everyone needs. Industry needs certainty. Governments cannot drain their budgets. They cannot put money behind something that cannot be delivered. And this mutual understanding will allow us to move forward.
Thanks very much. I mean, clearly there was a bit of a challenge, but also a plea to exactly realize these partnerships. But I also want to follow up a little bit on the political mood, because you were talking also about the long-term future of oil and gas. And clearly we have climate populism, but we also have Extinction Rebellion. We have a very strong push from some people who are saying we should not have a future which includes fossil fuels at all. So how do we reconcile that?
Yeah, thank you. Now, we believe in a balanced energy transition because we clearly saw what happened when there was a lack of gas coming from Russia. This really spiked the prices, and we see kind of both people and industry suffered this on? Yeah, and suffered. So we need to make sure that we are producing enough energy while we're doing the energy transition. But at the same time, as I said, the speed of the energy transition is not going fast enough. A lot of the renewables that we are putting into the energy mix is just kind of coping up for the energy increase, demand increase in energy. So that's why we kind of need to speed up. But it's so important now that we find this balance, producing oil and gas while it's still needed, but then it really matters how we produce it. That's why we put a lot of investments into power from shore, different type of compressors, etc., so we can reduce the emission while we still need oil and gas, because that emission also really matters. And it's about I think there's been a narrative out there for a long time that there will be a massive amount of new renewable energies coming that will be really, really cheap. And now what you say, the politics, backlash a little bit is more a realism, understanding that the cost probably will be a little bit higher. And that means that we now really need to find how do we actually are able to drive down the cost for developing new renewables. How can we spend less time getting the approvals so we can move faster, because that is inefficiency costs that we have as well. So I think we have the same targets here. And when the minister challenged me on the technology agnostic, my point is really that we are now investing in CO2 storage, transportation and storage, hydrogen, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, but I'm not sure which one of them will be the winner. So kind of, if we put in legislations now saying that this is what we want now, I think maybe we're doing it too fast. I'm totally agreeing with the minister in terms of you need to make the framework of, like radioactive waste. You say, I don't want it. That's perfectly fine. But if we put in too strict requirements, for instance, for green hydrogen, the amount of green hydrogen combined with blue hydrogen too early, we might not even be able to move forward with hydrogen at scale. So that was my point. So kind of making sure that we have enough technology agnostic so that we are able together to lower the cost of the energy transition.
I'll give you a chance to also come back on that. I want to add a question as well, but please also if you have any questions, any comments, then I will come back, and I already see one. But I wanted to just follow up on one of the points you made, because you were talking about taking a lot of baby steps in the right direction. But we are also hearing that the energy transition, the transformation of our economy is not moving fast enough. So is it enough to take these baby steps, given the scale and the scope of the challenge which we are facing?
As long as you set many in the right direction, and maybe also to recalibrate expectations. How to drive down costs for the energy transition, for example, what you mentioned also, you said it several times in the introduction. Indeed, the narrative has been, and still is, cheap renewable energy, because of course you don't need any fuel. So yes, it's cheap, but it comes of course also with costs, and we have seen the auction in the UK with a no-show. Due to unrealistic economic expectations. So it is still expensive to invest in offshore wind. And how to drive down these costs is what was already one of the takeaways of the North Sea Summit, was standardization. And we should be able, and this shouldn't be necessarily coming top-down. It can also come bottom-up, but we should meet top-down and bottom-up approaches is on standardization. Why can we not decide at the European level that for all auctions, all tenders being launched between this year and 2030, 2035, I don't want to, but it's just to make an example, so it's not yet set in stone. But during a specific time, that all these tenders, that the wind turbine that we will use is an 18 megawatts, 19, 15, let's say, but avoid a little bit the boom and bust. And at the same time, of course, make sure that we have test fields, that we prepare for the next standard, so that we don't cut down innovation. This to me is something very simple. It's also something that the industry, the supply chain is requesting, and that can be a short time answer to, I will not use the word down costs, but also difficult to say it in, but in any case, stabilize cost. And in that way, we can combine speed and also costs. With regard to the green and the blue hydrogen, I see the point, and I also understand the point, and I support the point. The targets that were decided at European level, the RFNBO targets, are 42% of green hydrogen in 2030 for hydrogen used in industries. So hydrogen used in transport is not part of it. All the transport in the refineries that is intended to is out of it. But also hydrogen as a residual gas and also byproducts are excluded. So that means that there is a market for blue hydrogen of at least 58%. What we wanted to do with the target is also stimulate at the same time the green hydrogen market, so that indeed these can develop together. And in the end, markets will indeed show if it can be feasible. And I will also say that, to me, both green hydrogen projects and blue hydrogen projects are coming to see me. And also the CO2 projects are coming to see ministers to say, help us in the investments. So we didn't pick one. We didn't say, we picked, in fact, hydrogen, and we said both the low carbon and the green, we want to see what works. And there is nothing wrong if in the end it doesn't work, that you can revise your policy. But I know for sure that if you don't put a target, the market will not develop. But I think we are not so far from each other. It's a little bit a challenge from both sides, but that in the end we do understand each other. And also, very important, there needs to be friction. There needs to be friction. I always say we have to be a little bit of mutual discomfort, and then we know we are on the right track.
Yeah, I totally agree on that one, and that's why kind of we challenge each other. But this is, as also said in my speech, you know, that we're able to collaborate, and just want to emphasize the really great collaboration we have with Belgium and with some of the other companies here, Engie, Fluxys, and ArcelorMittal, and with the government. We are able to discuss ways to move move forward. And just to add before we open up, you know, we both mentioned the infrastructure, and I think that's extremely important, because that is an extremely important part of the energy transition cost. And remember, in the 70s, in the 80s, and the 90s, companies invested in the gas pipelines that kind of developed the economic growth in Northern Europe, and you know, made Europe really competitive as a manufacturer. You know, heavy industry created a lot of jobs. Actually, the way I look at it, we have to do that job over again now. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we did it with fossil fuels, where one field could actually bear the cost of a pipeline, you know, a platform, onshore plant, and a pipeline all the way from Norway to Europe. When we're talking about green hydrogen and blue hydrogen, there is no project, no company that's going to lift that alone, because the volumes are for each companies are so small. This is why we need this cooperation. That's why we launched this CO2 European CO2 highway. That's why we're working together with Germany and other countries about hydrogen pipelines to see if that's possible. And transmission and the grids that I know the minister and all your colleagues working on. It's a part of the transition cost, and I think we need to really see how private sector and government can work really well on this.
I totally agree. And there is a big difference between indeed what we did in the 70s and in the 80s. Let's not forget it was a time that the energy market was not liberalized. And it was in a totally regulated context. Is when we built our nuclear power plants in the 70s in Belgium. It was in a situation that it was the committee of control committee that decided. It was in fact a trilateral committee. It was employers, it was vakbonden, unions. Thank you, Yves, and the government. And they decided we want 6 gigawatts of nuclear power. It was decided, it was done. It was a depreciation time of 20 years. And we have to take the same decisions now, but in a liberalized context. And marginal pricing is not delivering on security or supply or on climate targets. And there I'm absolutely, I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer here, so I'm putting something forward, but I don't have the answer. But we need a new thinking on policy. We need the times require a new balance to be found between policies and industries, also with regard to regulation, because the regulation that we have today will not make sure that interconnections are being built, because economic business cases are not viable. So in one way or the other, it's what you mentioned in your first question, your reaction to my introduction, and investments that come in anticipation is one of the most challenging topics that we have to address, knowing that a market cannot finance it and that public budgets not necessarily have the money. It takes courage from both sides to say we do it anyway. And to pick in grid infrastructure a winner, saying we are going to put it there and there and there.
Thanks very much. I see a number of questions, and we are already moving close to the end. So can I please ask you to keep the questions very short, so that the panelists also have a chance to answer them, so we can finish on time. So I've seen there.
Morning, Malte from the German Chambers Organization. I have a question to both panelists, and when it comes to energy security, we could read about an attack on a critical infrastructure this week, and I wonder what can be done to protect pipelines, etc., in a better way. And when it comes to financing, is it the job of national member states or maybe for the European Union as a whole? Thank you.
Still Secretariat, Arthur Forbes. Minister, I noticed, I couldn't but help very pleasantly noticing that you said the next coming months will be about moving forward without drama. And you also talked about the strategic agenda, so the 5-year program of priorities for the Union from next June onwards. The first step towards that has been the Granada Declaration, and I'm sure everybody has seen what it says about energy. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about how the declaration should be framed, particularly in your field of responsibility. You mentioned that this is the lighthouse for the Commission. In fact, it's a roadmap for the Council as well for the coming 5 years and for the 10 presidencies that will be in office during that time. So it's a very important document, and I'm very glad you mentioned it. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Peter Bocek. I'm with the European chemical industry. And we are particularly challenged because to really decarbonize, to become carbon neutral, we will need about 9 times the electricity and the energy we need now. This equals to about 900 nuclear power plants. That would mean we need to build some 30 nuclear power plants every year to meet these energy needs. It would also equal the size of Spain to cover it with windmills, or the size of Ireland to cover it with solar panels. So just to give you a dimension, and I didn't hear much encouragement from you with regard to how can we get there, or is it maybe time to revisit a little bit the policy ambition and the targets and the legislative avenue towards that? Thank you.
Also had an online question, but that was also on the Baltic interconnector and what that might mean. So we'll take those questions all together. I'll start with you, and then I'll give you the last word.
Yeah. So clearly, this is a incident I follow it from the media as well. This has also been the kind of the discussion after the Nord Stream pipelines last year. The pipelines coming from Norway, we have taken actions, working very closely together with the governments, NATO, and very good relationship between the Norwegian government and the governments where the pipeline lands. So we stepped up the surveillance of the pipelines. So we continue monitoring, but keeping in mind it's 9,000 kilometers of pipelines, so it's impossible to to have the status all the time.
I'm absolutely convinced that part of the financing should come from Europe, that we should look into this possibility. Looking forward to the grid infrastructure plan that Commissioner Šefčovič will be announcing, and that we should look into possibilities if there are possibilities within the MFF or other European money to put behind. The infrastructure and interconnection that we need cannot be solved by member states alone, because the interest is not tied to just one or the two member states. Like, for example, the interconnection between Denmark and Belgium benefits Germany also. So these interconnections are between, although it's set up as a radial connection, it has multiple effects. So that's something that we need to readdress and also recalibrate, and should look into ways how we can have a European perspective on that one. With regard to physical security, a lot has changed already. I've seen that firsthand. And I became a minister, that was October 2020. Everything that was physical security was managed at my administration. It was just something on a day-by-day basis. Now I have in my team security advisors. Legislation has changed, and I'm absolutely convinced that we still need to step up that one, and also recognize that all our emergency planning is still drafted in times of peace, and to address with situations in times of peace and not necessarily in times of war. With regard to the Granada declaration, it's a very tough one and a difficult one between heads of states and prime ministers. But the chapeau, the umbrella, is in the paragraph on competitiveness, which we in the Energy Council should translate into an energy agenda, and also in the Environment Council should translate in a climate council. I was maybe, yes, a little bit disappointed that it's disappeared like that in other topics that are now higher on the agenda. I think it's we cannot afford to step back. It's the same with your question. But also, let's not forget that in Europe, after the liberalization, we had very little of no energy capacity coming online. There were a lot of phase outs in different countries. A lot of member states have also old and aging infrastructure that is not renewed. There is even then, I see that in Belgium, but also in Germany, also in France, there is not so much new builds, and not with the speed that we so urgently need. I think that everyone knows that in a short term, building 30 nuclear power plants, good luck with permitting. Good luck with power plants. With windmills, the same goes. So fast permitting, access to financing is the way to go. You mentioned specifically the chemical sector. I know them very well, as we have with Antwerp one of the biggest BASF. Who is very committed to carbon neutrality, with also are also looking into multiple options. Electrification is maybe only one, and we have also supported a lot their plans with CO2. Capturing the Kairos at Sea project that was also funded by EU Innovation Fund. And I hear specifically from these sectors that it is a challenge that can be done, but indeed you need to have a backup also by policymakers who hold on to the targets that we have set. Maybe also to that topic, grids and grid operators always also need to follow, because you mentioned the size of Spain for windmills and Ireland for solar panels. In any case, renewable energy will grow a lot. So that also means that our grid operators will be scheduling loads and not necessarily generation. So also from a grid perspective, it's not only a CapEx perspective, but also digitalization. What can we do with flexibility? How do we manage hybrid infrastructures more than radial ones? Yes, the challenge is right in front of us.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to what I started with. I think we are in an incredibly challenging environment, where we are facing many trade-offs, where we are facing a high degree of uncertainty about the future, and where we are also facing more and more the distributional consequences of these transitions and the political consequences that has. But that makes it even more important to have these policy discussions, to bring also the different actors around the table. So I'm very grateful that we have this opportunity, and it certainly is a discussion which is going to continue. So thank you very much to Equinor, to you, and to you, Minister, and also to all of you for attending. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation in future. Thank you very much.